because you could have the most stressful event happen, but if you're regulated in your nervous system, you'll take it in stride. And we almost become afraid of the feelings, which causes even further disruption of your nervous system. Connection is being present in the moment that you are.
Over the course of my life and career, I've discovered the power of consciously investing in mindset and personal development. It has been a true game changer for me in my personal and professional life, and I'm extremely excited that you decided to join us today to take one step forward in your own life. Most of my breakthroughs have come from one-on-one conversations. We created this show to bring you those unfiltered conversations each and every week. Hello and welcome back to the Connected Mindset Live. I'm your host, Greg Tomczyk. Extremely glad that you decided to join us today. Whether it's morning or afternoon or evening for you, we have an exceptional episode today with Miss Corene Phelps, and we're going to dive in here shortly. But before we do, many of you that have been listening to the show know why I started Valor Cybersecurity, because I was a victim of a cyber attack in one of my first companies. And we recently came out with a solution that I wish I had, which is just a free way to understand where you stand from a cybersecurity threat perspective. Are you at risk? And you're going to be able to get that for free. I'll put the link in the show notes. But this is really the starting path if you have a business or a brand to understand where you are from a cybersecurity perspective and a way that you can improve it. Something I wish I had early on in my business career, and we're going to deliver that to you. So without further ado, Ms. Corene Phelps, thanks so much for joining us. Really looking forward to diving in. And how we like to start this show to open things up, get the audience a little bit more information about you, is what mission are you on, and what are you hoping that each person listening in today walks away with?
I am on a mission to help individuals manage and navigate stress, the stressful environment that we live in, and basically learn how to take that stress and rather having it be something that's a negative impact on their health, their well-being, their mindset, and their performance, be something that they're able to harness and use as fuel, which is something that we are all capable of doing, is standing in the face of stress and not having it impact us negatively.
Yeah, I love that. That's definitely something that I think anybody in business, but anybody in a role where they're pushing themselves beyond their comfort zone is going to encounter. So I think it's not getting rid of stress, but one of the things I want to start the conversation at is what brought you to the realization that people around you needed, this type of modality that you're bringing to the world now.
Oh my goodness, because I needed it. I found myself sitting in an emergency room thinking that I was having a heart attack at the age of 37, but I was actually having a panic attack that was driven by the third time that I was entering burnout. So I kept ignoring the signs, and finally it was a 2x4 that I was getting across the back that was like, okay, it is time. Like, what is it going to take for you to finally learn that you can't ignore these signs and you need to learn how to manage stress? Because we can't remove it. It's just not impossible. It's impossible to remove it. And really we wouldn't want to. It's a thing that actually expands us and pushes us to our edges. But if you allow it to, I don't know, not be able to to turn off and impact you in a way that's negatively, this is how we end up sick. We end up with disease. We end up with relationship problems, money problems. All the problems come from us not being able to navigate external stress.
Mm-hmm. How do you look at stress? Do you think it starts internally and how we process the outside world? Or do you think by nature our outside worlds give our body stress, our vehicles that we're operating the world through, from that standpoint, kind of the internal versus the external?
Oh, that's a good question. I think it's kind of like a chicken and an egg, but I I actually think that it most likely is our perception of stress, because I think the outside world, while it's in a constant state of change, it's how we respond, because you could have the most stressful event happen, but if you're regulated in your nervous system, you'll take it in stride and it'll bounce right off of you. Or you could be in a certain frame of mind, a certain state, and it could be the tiniest thing, just like a grain of sand in your shoe. And all of a sudden we're taking it personally and flying off the handle. So it's our perception and the way that we are viewing it, the lens with which we're seeing it from.
Yeah, I love that. And that's, I think one of the things I learned from sports playing baseball was our coaches would always tell us that, there's going to be chaos always going on in our environment, but it's how we perceive it that results in how we respond to it as opposed to react to it. And I think, that was key for me. But, as I got out of sports, I realized that the world around me looked at stress differently than, the athletic world. And I found myself caught up in that kind of a little bit of a skewed perception of what stress was and how I could handle it. It was a different type of stress than being on a pitcher's mound and knowing what I needed to do. And there was, a lot of chaos and going through all the transitions I've gone through since. And I think we're always going through transition. So it's, it's not always the same type of stress. And I think that's important for people to recognize is it comes in different shapes and sizes, and it really does impact your health, mentally, physically, spiritually. And when I initially came across your work, I saw nervous system. And that's one of the things I've been really interested in lately with some of the transitions that I went through the past 6 to 8 months. I started to realize that even though I was doing the right things for my body, my nervous system was kind of disrupted in a way. And once I came to that realization, I was able to put some things in place. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on, what the nervous system is, how you came to understand it yourself, and then what you've seen kind of other people do to transform it.
Yeah. So, well, I love the fact that you became aware of the whole idea of the nervous system. It's kind of a buzzword right now. And sometimes buzzwords can be like, I don't know, I'm happy that it's a buzzword, because we're starting to really become mainstream, where people are understanding the impact of our nervous system on everything. It's integral to everything that we do. So I think the best way to explain it is that your nervous system is the bridge between you and the outside world. It is the way that we manage and handle stress. And part of your nervous system is your subconscious mind. So your nervous system controls your heart rate. It controls all sorts of different things that are integral to just us being alive. And it is kind of like the almost like the operating system of your body. So imagine you are like a race car. Your nervous system is kind of like whether you're putting the foot on the gas or the foot on the brake. And some of those things are unconscious for us, like they're just automatic, like your heart's going to beat whether you are asking it to or not. But there are parts of our nervous system that we get to drive, much like a race car. And this is the piece that I'm extremely fascinated by, and what I really help people harness the power of is being able to control those things and put your foot on the gas when you need to and you want to, and it's in your best interest, and put your foot on the brake when it also serves you. The problem that we run into, and which is something that I was experiencing and why I am so passionate about it, is we tend to get stuck with both the foot on the gas and on the brake. And that's when we start to have these really awful health impacts. I mean, really, most diseases come from a nervous system issue. And so the more that we can learn how to navigate and manage stress, the less disease we will be experiencing as a society as a whole. And it's really important for us as entrepreneurs, business owners, because there are these moments when we really need to be able to show up at our highest potential. And that's when we want to be able to put our foot on the gas. And when we put our foot on the gas in that way, we kind of have two responses. We can show up with your foot on the gas, kind of like in this cool, collected state, or you could have your foot on the gas and be really frantic. And when we need to be able to perform at the top of our game, like imagine you're getting ready to walk onto a stage and deliver a keynote speech to a group of people whom it's going to be like a game changer for your business. You want to be able to walk on that stage and deliver just like a professional athlete would, walking onto that field and thriving in the face of kind of uncertainty and knowing exactly what to do and how to do it and being able to do it in a way that's going to wow everyone around you. And that's what nervous system regulation starts to do when you're able to drive your nervous system like a race car driver.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that analogy. I can almost like feel that, where it's the gas and the brake. And oftentimes in the past, I always kind of stuff those feelings down. I think a lot of us do, where it's just like you feel it, but you don't listen to it. You just kind of like let it be stuffed down. And I think that creates, like, you're confusing the two, where you're going back and forth and between the tube pedal and the brake. So
yeah, absolutely. And your nervous system talks to you through your intuition. That's part of the part of your nervous system, because your intuition really is seated in your subconscious mind. And so we get these little intuitive hits and we become so disassociated from them. We start to ignore them. So we become trained to like not even feel the things that we need to feel. And then we almost become afraid of the feelings, which causes even further disruption of your nervous system.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love how you make it not as medical, as, because the nervous system traditionally in the past has been so medical. And I think that's what people kind of ran away from it, because it was like, oh, that's like a nerve in my body. Like, I don't understand how nerves fire and work. So I think making it more understandable to people allows them to take more focused action.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely is medical, but then it's also this whole mindset piece. It's a performance piece. And there's even, if we want to go there, there's this spiritual context that gets to come into play too.
Mm-hmm. How do you look at that piece of it? Because I'm interested in that. Is that spiritual practices like breath work and hypnotherapy, or is that more kind of mental rituals that you're going through more on the internal?
It kind of encapsulates all of that. When we start tapping into the subconscious mind, like I said, the nervous system really is the bridge between us and the outside world, us and I would say the spiritual world. And this, we might be getting into like a whole realm of, maybe, I don't know if you want to go there or not, but in my opinion, anything that is like so vast and amazing, when you start bringing science into it, I believe that's spiritual. I mean, how can you, I mean, the complexities of all of that, how can you not look at that and be like, wow, there's got to be some sort of something else at play here. And your nervous system, your subconscious mind, your intuition, all of it is this interconnected piece. And when we can kind of take that pause and drop into the internal world, I think it's when we're able to start to tap into those feelings of awe and gratitude, which are an integral piece of being able to manage stress and also view other people's model of the world and have empathy for them, which is another piece of being able to be regulated in your nervous system.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's incredible. And that's one of the reasons that we started this show, was because we wanted to help people better connect with the world around them. And we found in our own journeys that, you know, based off of the mindsets we had, based off of the perceptions that we had, we could wake up 3 different ways on 3 different days. And the whole day was different across those. And that's, I think, at the core of those spiritual practices that somebody can have, that really sets their day up for success or fulfillment or whatever they want to get out of it at the end of the day.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. When we are able to connect to those internal pieces, we're able to walk on a higher path. And when we're able to walk on that higher path, we're able to perform better. We're able to support other people, which then creates a massive ripple effect. Imagine if everyone was walking around in that kind of a state where they were cool, calm, and collected, operating at their highest potential, and then helping everyone around them tap into that power too. I mean, I think that we'd have a lot less issues in the world.
Yeah. A lot less disease, a lot less frustration and conflicts.
Yeah.
I think that leads us to a good place on a term that I've been pretty fascinated with lately, which is codependence. And kind of, we've always known that the people we surround ourselves with is vital to who we become and who we are in that current state. And, one of the things around the nervous system and the energy we have, it's a lot. We feel that from the people that we're surrounded by. And, you mentioned it right there, where what if more people were in that kind of level of consciousness and they were in that present type state? I think it would make everybody better off, because things around us do impact us. It's like a dog beside us. If a dog's beside us and it's sitting there calmly, that makes our nervous system more calm. And that's why they say like service dogs and therapy dogs. And I think that's the same with people. And I think a lot of people don't choose, friends, business partners, colleagues based off of that aspect of how is that person going to impact, where I sit and where I stand in my own being. How have you seen that impact kind of your own life and the people that you've coached?
Oh my goodness. Well, I love that we're talking about this because there's something when we talk about nervous system regulation, it's called co-regulation. And there's all of these studies that have been done that show and I can't even remember like the actual statistics, but basically just being in proximity to someone, whether it's a high performer or whether it's someone who's regulated, automatically it's contagious. And it's because we are communal beings. And so I've seen direct impact both in my personal life, but also in my client's life. I mean, it's a reason when you step into a community, it's the why everyone right now, I think community is such a big buzzword, because when we step into a community, we tend to absorb the energy, the habits, all of it. So if we're looking to create something bigger, it's really important to be able to surround yourself with people thinking bigger, doing bigger things. And like on the other side of that, if you happen to be hanging around with people whom maybe they're smoking, drinking, not working out, and you might be the epitome of health, but if you spend all of your time, you are going to backslide into some habits that are not necessarily aligned with whom you are. It's just contagious. It just happens. And when I first started in entrepreneurship, I just started putting myself in rooms with people who were thinking bigger, doing big things, taking risks. And all of a sudden, I just stepped into that persona. And the next thing you know, like you're investing in yourself and learning things and growing. And I see it firsthand with my clients as well. When they come into, whether it's a community container or one-to-one, all of a sudden the energy is elevated and things just start to kind of take on a life of their own in a positive context, of course.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. Co-regulation. I think codependency may be a different term. I think what I really was in kind of getting to was that regulation piece of like, if somebody around you is not regulated and you're depending on them to kind of, give you feedback or give you back energy, I think that's critical. And that's definitely a term I'm going to put in my repertoire. Co-regulation.
Yeah. I mean, well, I think even codependency, when you think about that, it's a kind of like makes sense that we would end up in codependent relationships based on the principles of codependent or co-regulation, because we want to be in community. We as human beings need it. We desire it. And so it's an easy thing to fall into if someone potentially isn't necessarily healed or two people aren't in a more healed and aware mindset. A codependent relationship can happen based on our needs as human beings, the needs of our nervous system. And then we end up in this, cycle of kind of bad habits, which is why it's so important for us to step into that awareness and really be discerning whom we put ourselves in proximity to.
Yeah. and doing it intentionally, I think, is critical. And I think talking about it, I think a lot of people stuff it down. It's kind of like the money conversation at the dinner table. It's like, if you either talk about it or you don't talk about it. And I don't think enough people talk about, that aspect of things. And I think it needs to be. And that's one of the things you're putting out into the world, which I think is amazing, and more people need it. And definitely looking forward to continuing to follow your work on that front. What do you think most people struggle with? I think people listening in today, they get the topic of, what it feels like, some of the things that are signs, but what do you see most people struggling with when it comes to peak performance and, kind of regulating their nervous system again, or revitalizing themselves, getting unstuck? We have kind of all these terms, but, what do you see most people struggling with today? And then what would you say that where they can start to get on the right path?
Oh goodness, that's almost a hard one because it's so many different things. I think one of the things is packing your schedule so tightly that you don't have the space to have an awareness for all of us, right? I mean, if you are a meeting to meeting to meeting or running from one place to the other, you're in a constant state of not being in your body. And when we're not in our body, we end up snapping or not being aware of the words that we're saying before we say them, having that moment of pause, that space to think. And so I would say that would probably be one of the top things. And we start to think that almost like rules don't apply to us, like, oh, I can do that. And yes, you could pack your schedule all day long for 1, maybe 2 days in a row and be totally fine. But when it starts to be that way over and over and over, that's when we start to, I think, really leave our body and not be able to perform at a high level, not be aware of what's going on around us, and really become disconnected from what's happening in our body.
Mm-hmm.
I think that would be the top one.
Yeah. Why do you think people do that? Do you think it's a sense of their self-worth is linked to their schedule?
Yes, I think that's definitely a thing. I think that we're also in a society and a culture that has glorified this idea of the badge of busy, right? Like the busier you are, the more you're actually doing, which is a complete lie. It really is. So often we're so busy, but we're not actually accomplishing anything. We feel really great about it, but we're not actually accomplishing things. And it is hard to sit with the space and the thoughts a lot of times. And so I think that gets a little bit scary when we're in this place of staying busy all of the time. When the silence comes in and the thoughts come in, there can be a little bit of a place of panic. But the more we are able to step into that place, actually, when we clear our schedule, we're able to get more done in less time. But that actually takes work. And sometimes it takes a little bit of a backslide where you're taking 2 or 3 steps backwards before you catapult forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think people don't even consider the step backwards. They only consider, I have to keep growing, I have to keep moving forward, I have to keep, getting on the phone, or I have to keep putting myself into tasks. And what does that step backwards look like? And I'm sure that's a lot of the resistance that you get with the clients that you work with is, I know I need to take a step back, but where do I start?
Yeah, well, it's so uncomfortable. I think the resistance is like, oh my gosh, I couldn't possibly hit pause right now. The whole world's going to crumble around me. Everything feels so urgent and dire. And when we actually start to take that step back, you start to see how 99.9% of everything is not that urgent.
Mm-hmm.
And so it really is. It's just being able to, for me and working with a client, what happens is if I can just get you to show up and feel for the hour that we have blocked, typically that is enough of a pause to at least have those seeds start to kind of, I don't know, germinate, if we
Yeah,
will.
yeah, yeah. I'm a huge supporter of that. That we're all planting seeds, and a lot of times we plant the seed and then throw poison on it. I like to think like it's, you plant the seed and you do something with good intention, but then you're not giving it healthy food, you're not giving it healthy energy, you're not giving it, the time that it needs and the relaxation. You're just giving it like constant
Yeah.
feeding of high rays of sunshine potentially, or high rays of chemicals.
Oh, yeah, it's that
Mhm.
instant gratification society
Mhm.
that we live in, and
Yeah.
yeah.
Mhm. How has being a D1 athlete shaped who you are today, and who you're becoming?
Oh, I think so. Very early on in my, I think in childhood, I really started to understand how sports are truly metaphorical for life. And so that piece of really understanding that that was like the playground of where, like, it's where I got to test out ideas, thoughts, feelings, all of the things in my young adult life, and learning how to interact and play with other people was a big thing. Understanding that a team is really only as strong as the weakest link. And so if everyone shows up holding that responsibility of doing their part and showing up at their highest potential, that whether you win or whether you lose doesn't matter. You just know that you showed up with everything that you had. And it really shows you, and teaches you about trust, both trust in yourself and trust in other people. And that failure is probably the most valuable thing that we can learn how to embody in life. It's not about the wins. I mean, if we were winning every day, all day, then that would be pretty boring.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, it really would. It'd feel good from probably an internal chemical standpoint, but then you get numb to it, and it would just be like, oh, it's just another thing. Yeah,
Absolutely. It's
yeah.
polarity, right? Is at
Hmm.
play there, right? If we are always winning, then we don't really know how good it feels to win or how good it feels to actually work for the win.
Hmm. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, one of the things that I try to do in the cybersecurity world, because it's a very most executives when they come into that topic are very stressed out and their nervous systems are very like on edge. They might not understand it, so it's a little bit of ego there. But one of the things that we do is when we do an assessment, we do interviews with every executive in the business, big or small. And for the first 5 minutes, it's a lot of like questions around, what was your favorite thing you did this week, or what is something that, a win from this week, or just something outside of cybersecurity, because a lot of times they feel like they're being interviewed on, where they're deficient, and I don't think any of us really enjoy that. So that's been a big thing I've tried to bring from sports to the business world, because I had coaches early on that they knew maybe they need to drill something into us as a team, but they started the conversation a little bit differently. So a little bit of the communication aspect. I know you do breath work and hypnotherapy, um, and I'm sure a lot of those come with difficult conversations. And I think conversation and words really impact our nervous systems and our ability to perform. Have you come across any breakthroughs in, how to approach those tougher conversations, with the folks you're coaching today?
Well, I mean, I think that the biggest breakthrough in how to approach them is actually being able to show up with a regulated nervous system, because a lot of times, I mean, the vulnerability piece is really important, right? The other person being able to open up and be vulnerable. But I could ask questions and they could be the greatest questions, and you might not feel safe
Mhm.
to open up to me. But the piece that I think is the most important is the energy that you show up with, because you can feel it. It's a felt experience when someone shows up and you're like, oh, I feel safe with that person automatically before they even ask the question, before they even ask you like the hard things. So that has been the most pivotal thing. So I feel like before I enter into a conversation, before I enter into any kind of container or relationship, the first thing that I get to do is to make sure that I am radically responsible in my energy and my nervous system, which then facilitates and creates a safe space for that breakthrough to happen.
Mm-hmm. How do you think you control the energy you put out into the world? Because everybody probably picks up something different based off of that perception we talked about and how they're perceiving, stress or the outside world. Like they could have somebody that is bringing such good energy, such calm energy, but if they're coming in with a on fire nervous system or on fire, they just came out of a meeting that they were yelling in.
Yeah.
How do you make sure that you're, I guess, matching or, counteracting, their energy?
Yeah, well, so matching and mirroring is definitely something that happens
Yeah.
with your nervous system.
Mm-hmm.
So if someone was in a conversation, they came out and they were like, what? Like
Mm-hmm.
sitting down with me first, when we are regulated, the thing is that almost like the most regulated nervous system is kind of like the antenna, the beacon that's like this. So knowing that, I don't allow that energy to pull me down into a reactive state. So when you can hold that energy like that is the first phase and step. But if I was having a conversation with someone like that, I might actually say, wow, I see that you've just had a really intense experience, or depending on what was going on, I would use some sort of language to make them aware. And then I would ask them usually to take a breath or two with me if they were in a state that would be receptive to that. But the tonality of your voice, the eye contact that you make with someone else will start to lead someone to a place where that will help them kind of come down into a more regulated state. And so I'll usually start to notice an opening where I might be able to say, maybe you could just can we just take a breath together? Can we just, take a pause? Because I really need to regulate my nervous system, might be something that I would say. Or I'd be like, oh my gosh, I'm really on edge. Do you mind if we just take a couple deep breaths together? And that usually is enough to bring someone down. And then you'd say, oh my gosh, wow, your energy has changed. And I would point it out to them.
Yeah, I love that. That's a great way to approach it, because a lot of times that impacts us and it causes us to act in a certain way that is, it's almost like pouring gasoline on the fire because we're feeling stressed because they're stressed. And then we respond in a way that's like, all right, let's just get to work and, keep pushing on when, everybody's distracted by that.
Yeah, absolutely. And even another piece that, depending on the nature of the relationship, just even like reaching out and putting your hand on someone, because touch is such an important thing. And of course, you should never touch someone if you don't have permission or you don't have that dynamic. But just even whether it's a hand on the shoulder or a hand on the arm can be so grounding for someone else.
Yeah, I love that. And I've heard that there's a study done between pitchers and catchers, because I was a pitcher, and it was interesting because like the best catchers would always, facilitate some type of touch, whether it was like, hey, like here's the ball, and then they put it in your hand and like, touch your hand, or like, smack you on the back, or, touch your arm. And it was amazing that the energy the pitcher would bring back to that scenario. And it's a small example of, how we can more positively impact people, which I think we all want. But a lot of us get in the moment and we get stuck in a moment where we're not able to kind of take ourselves out of it to see the bigger picture. And I think a lot of people are stuck in that. A lot of people say like, you're stuck in the box or you're stuck in your own world.
Yeah.
And I think we all want to kind of hop out of that, but it's not a clear path, down to hop out of that box, which I think is critical.
Well, the funny thing, I think, when you're saying that, it reminds me of that statement of it's not about you.
Yeah.
And everything, right? Like pretty much it's like life isn't about you. We like to think that it is because we are ego-centered beings. And when we can start to embody that and understand that our energy impacts someone else's energy, and if we can start to kind of have that approach of it's not about me, then we get to both receive great energy from other people and we get to give it to others.
Yeah. Yeah. Give and receive. And a lot of people talk about like just, I think one of the terms is if you're unhappy, just go serve people. And I've been thinking a lot about that lately of, some people burn themselves out by just, serving other people. Then they forget about themselves. And then when they're, in their 50s or 60s, they're like, I'm in terrible health. I've served a lot of people. I've made a lot of money. And it's kind of, how do you think about that today? And how has that perspective developed for you on that balance between making sure you're in the right energy, mind space, spirituality to be able to bring good energy, and kind of tending to that, garden, as well as serving the others around you and not making sure that's not a toxic dynamic?
Mm. I feel like I'm just going to bring all the cliches today. We cannot pour from an empty cup.
Yeah.
So if we want to be of service
Mhm.
and to be able to impact it at the highest level, the first phase is making sure that our cup is full. And the funny part about that is our nervous system can oftentimes be referred to like a vessel. So if you imagine that your cup is overflowing, few things. A, we get to expand our capacity because your nervous system, the more that we step into this high performance and use it, we can actually expand our cup. And instead of being like a tiny little cup, it can now be a vase and there's more room. So the more we practice filling our own cup, the more we expand our capacity to serve and give. So that's the first phase, is making sure that you are taken care of. And that's health, that's sleep, that's drinking enough water, that's exercising, that's eating great food, that's making sure that your relationships are great relationships, that you're pouring into them, that sort of thing, before you move out and into the world and start to create that ripple effect on the next layer.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that. And I think we hear a lot about filling our cup, but I love how you mentioned the nervous system. When you actually get it regulated, it expands.
Absolutely.
And that super expansion that you talk about. So I want to dive a little bit into, I'm sure you've come across quite a few people with different situations, different things they're battling with. You've gone through your own journey. You have your podcast, 200 episodes. Congratulations on that. It's incredible.
Thank you.
What are some of the key takeaways, kind of life lessons, biggest things that you have discovered, through your journey from that event at 34, having burnout for the third time, realizing like, I can't do this anymore, to the Corey that's in front of us today, and some of the things that just stick out to you that you are kind of putting out into the world today from a key lesson standpoint?
Oh, well, the more that we can start to understand that everyone is doing the best that they can with what they have in the moment is, I think, such a pivotal understanding for me. And that most people are operating from programming that's not updated. So they're operating from essentially like a child's programming, because that's when we are formed, is that 0 to 7 time frame. That subconscious is formed then. And so all of the events and the experiences that we have at that time really are the driver for the rest of our life, if we don't go in and do the upgrades, do the healing and all of it. And I know healing is definitely another one of those buzzwords that's going around, and it can sound a little scary. It can seem a little overused. But I mean, I think that it's a really important piece, is for all of us to be able to understand that all of our patterns, all of our actions, all of our behaviors come from that place, until we start to change and upgrade those patterns and behaviors. And understanding and learning that has been such a pivotal piece. It's made it so that I'm able to have so much more empathy and understanding that everyone really is just operating from their model of the world.
Mm. Yeah. And do you think that's all childhood? Do you think it's current
Absolutely.
surroundings, or yeah.
Absolutely. So the inside of that, I mean, when we, again, trauma is another thing that's
Mhm.
being thrown around all of the time, and understanding, yes, there's big T and little t, there's big things that go on for people that are catastrophic, but something doesn't have to fall into a catastrophic framework for it to impact us. We all have experiences that have made us feel bad, hurt us, shaped us in the way that we show up in the world today. And you didn't have, as a child, the bandwidth, understanding, or knowledge that you do now as an adult to kind of see from like a bird's eye view and really understand, because you were a child. But it does dictate how we respond in adult life. And so until you can kind of go back in and start to understand these things that drive your patterns, then they're going to shape how you show up.
Mhm. Absolutely. Yeah. One of my mentors talks about the evolution from being a human animal to a human being, and
Ah,
how when we're growing up, if we don't learn some of these principles, we're kind of human animals. We're reactive. We're just kind of conforming to the world around us. We're being kind of that animals, as opposed to being a being that has some type of framework for operating in the world and continues to update that. And it resonated with me because I've seen it so much in sports. Like, I've played with a lot of people from the Dominican Republic and like different countries that didn't have some of the frameworks that we have access to, around us today. And you realize that when you're just going off of your environment, you're kind of just, you co-regulating based off of what other people are putting in. And oftentimes that's not intentional because you don't know the difference. And that's been huge for my evolution process to help me continue on my self-mastery journey, and get me in a place where I can bring my best self to conversations like this. So that's definitely something that resonates with me. Before we get to the last question that we like to ask on the show, and it's been exceptional to be with you today, where can folks find you? How can they engage with you? If they want to take you up on, your coaching program, where can they find that?
oh, well, I'm on all of the channels, so you pretty much can find me anywhere. But I like to hang out I'm on LinkedIn, and I'm over on Instagram as well. So love to have conversations in the DMs on either one of those places. I also have a website. It's Corene Phelps. You can find all sorts of information there. And of course, the podcast, the Super Expander podcast, if you kind of just want to learn a little bit more, you want to dive in, binge a couple episodes, the Super Expander is on any podcast channel that you like to listen to podcasts on.
Excellent. I'm going to put the link to your website in the chat here so folks can check it out. We'll also put it in the show notes as well, so folks can check you out. Definitely check out the podcast. I listened to a couple episodes leading up to this episode and was able to check out the 200 episode anniversary, which is a great compilation of some of the things that we talked about today. And I think folks should definitely check that out. I love what you're doing with the platform. It's so impactful. I think people need more of it. So hopefully, in the coming months, you'll have folks from this show reach out and benefit from all the great things you're doing, from breath work to hypnotherapy to just having conversations in the right capacity to help people be better on the other side of that conversation. I think we just need a little bit more of that in the world. And you gave and casted that vision of, what if we were all operating at our highest selves, and how much better the world would be, from a health standpoint, from a physical standpoint, from a spirituality standpoint. So I think it's incredible. I love what you're doing. Definitely support and looking forward to continuing the conversation. One of the things we like to end the show with, because we're all about connectivity here and helping people better connect to the world around them. What does connection mean to you today, whether it's business or in your personal life?
Connection is being present in the moment that you are in. So making sure that your head is where your heart is and your heart is where your feet are. I think that that is the most pivotal piece of creating connection, whether that is in a group format or whether it is in a one-to-one format. And if we can take the time to make sure that we get in that space before we enter into any kind of interaction, we will start to create a deeper connection with the other human being or human beings that we're with.
Absolutely. And it helps us get more of what we want to put out into the world, which I think a lot of people want. But that's really the first step to get there. And it's definitely an impactful one. Corey, thanks so much for your time. Looking forward to continuing the conversation, and we'll definitely be in touch soon.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much. It's such an honor to be here and have this conversation with you. I appreciate you.